Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. It has been a long time coming actually. So, as you can tell by the title of the video, I've been slowly getting back into playing Insurgency. And because I've kind of gotten back into playing, I feel obligated to make content around the game since I kind of didn't really give the game a fair shake in terms of my last video. That last video was a very, I'm not going to say emotional, but there was definitely a lot more emotion behind my thoughts that didn't really get translated into my voice, which kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And so this video is just kind of like a, how do I put this? Imagine this as somebody who's coming back into a community who has taken a long break from it, a nice long break from it, and is just kind of eager to kind of get back into the game itself. So that leads me into the topic of today's video, which is just very, very briefly going over my initial thoughts on the latest patch. This is the 1.4 update that saw the addition of the Galil into the game, as well as the new map Hillside, aka Snowjar, as well as the introduction of a new game mode, which is Frontline, and then the updated UI system and categorization. And honestly, I gotta say that all in all, I feel like the update is good. If you look at your update size, most people I think had an update of around like 4 to 6 gigs, depending on when the last update you got for the game was. Even after the patch dropped, there was a hotfix that was dropped shortly thereafter, and I really didn't see any notes released for that, so I'm just gonna go ahead based off of my experience in playing the new patch the past 2 or 3 days. So let's briefly go over the new map. Hillside, aka Snowjar, is a remake and re-envisioning of the classic map from Insurgency Source, also known as Sinjar. Sinjar wasn't really my favorite map from Insurgency's Source. It wasn't a bad map by any means, but because of the way that it was built, I felt like some modes didn't really play well on that map, and particularly due to the spawns and the lanes that those spawns would lead you to. That being said, here with this version of the game, I really like Hillside. There's a lot more cover leading to the objectives for the most part. There are a couple spawn points on the push game mode that don't really make sense. They kind of point you in the wrong direction, and sometimes they just point you at a wall, and then you have to like go 50-50 as to which direction you want to go. But for the most part, the map flows great. There's lots of cover, there's lots of good lanes, very, very vertical, very, very set lanes. And even though the fire support is still a little annoying to deal with when playing any of the respawn modes, such as push or skirmish or frontline, for the most part, the map is enjoyable to play. A side note to go along with this is that the map at this current time, for me at least, runs really great. It actually runs better for me than Ministry. So hopefully we'll see Ministry get that same sort of optimization that Hillside currently has. Moving off from the new map, let's talk about the new mode, which is Frontline. And they describe Frontline as being a tug of war of sorts. If you've played the Day of Infamy game, you'll be familiar with it. Personally, I don't dislike the mode by any means. It does feel like a better push, if that makes sense. Like, I think I actually would prefer if Frontline would eventually replace push, or maybe replace skirmish, since more people play push and not a lot of people play skirmish. I wouldn't actually be against that, because Frontline does play well, at least with the way the game currently is right now and the mechanics that are in there. I definitely would say Frontline is a big plus. Definitely the strongest point of this update. A lot of people were really upset when they introduced TDM into the game, just because it felt super arcadey and didn't feel like Insurgency. That's no longer in the game now though, and they also stated that they were talking about rotating game modes in and out of the temporary playlist, so Frontline's probably not here to stay, but I think it would be a good idea to replace Skirmish with Frontline. I'm just gonna throw that out there. As a gamer, just know that as somebody who enjoys PvP, I feel like Frontline is a better game mode than Skirmish. Now, moving off of the new game mode, let's now talk about the new menus and the new UI. The way they did the menus is they kind of bracketed together all the co-op game modes, and they bracketed the regular versus playlist, but they also have subcategories for the respawn, like the wave-based game modes, the point-based game modes, and then they have like the featured game mode down there as well. But the way that they did the point capture was they lumped firefight and skirmish together, which in my opinion doesn't mix well. Skirmish doesn't really play like firefight. Firefight doesn't really play like skirmish. For those few people who pay attention to the layout of these maps in these various modes, you'll notice that a lot of the skirmish maps now have altered objectives where they actually match up now with the firefight objectives. So the skirmish maps are actually scaled a bit smaller, which is a great step in the right direction in my opinion. But the big issue that skirmish has versus firefight is the fact that there's automatic respawns. With Firefight, it's a lot easier to kind of control the map because there's no like automatic respawns, and so it kind of creates a lot more tactical experience in my opinion. I think the respawns in Skirmish kind of take away from that because what the game mode essentially is just a rush for the cache. You blow up the cache and then you can triple cap the enemy out once you wipe out a good number of their waves, which sounds fun, but in reality, it doesn't really play well, and I'm not gonna take this video to go into detail about why that is. Just know that right now, I think like this was a good update as far as the direction of putting Skirmish, but I don't feel like Skirmish is a good game mode still, at least with the kill support. I think if they want to make it better, there's more steps they need to take in order to do that. Moving on from that, let's talk about Firefight. So not really any love for Firefight, but strangely enough, with the new UI and the new menu selection screen, competitive matchmaking has actually seen a lot more love. I see a lot more players playing it, I see a lot more people enjoying it, and that's over a very brief period of time, but, you know, it does matter. Firefight, I think, is the game's unique strong point. I feel like Push and the other wave-based respawn game modes are very similar to game modes that are already in other games. Firefight's the only one that really has that unique flair. It's kind of like a mixture of Hardpoint and Search and Destroy, in my opinion. But that being for neither here nor there, again, I'm not going to go into full details about my thoughts on the state of Firefight right now. I'll save that for a different video later down the line. So overall, just going back over what all this patch brought in, at least from a PvP stance, it brought in that new game mode, the new map. It helped kind of change the way that they segregate the game modes, made it a little easier for people to select the game modes that they were interested in, and they also added in a little bit of love for the competitive scene by having rank decay for those who are in the higher rank category, which kind of enticed them to play more. So all in all, I'm not happy with what I believe to be the long-term results of this update, assuming there are no other updates. However, I do think this update was overall necessary, of course, because it brought new content into the game. More specifically, it brought about the hints of what's to come in the future as far as for the casual audience, which is night maps. A lot of people are excited about that. The potential of bringing Ambush back with a rotating game mode. Let's say they remove Frontline, maybe Ambush is the next in line. Not against that at all. And then, of course, the slow refocus on competitive, which I'm a huge fan of. I think what's next for them is honestly just kind of keeping down this path, making sure that they're appeasing the casual audience, but making sure that they don't just completely neglect the competitive community, because honestly the competitive community needs a lot of love in the future if there's any hope of that scene really blossoming into something more than what it is right now, and it's gonna have to come from NWI if they want to see that succeed. But that's really just a brief summary of the overall patch. If I had to give a rating for the patch, I'd give it a nice 8 out of 10, maybe a 7.5 out of 10 if I'm including personal bias in there. They did add a lot of optimization changes. They kind of fixed the jump. The jump always felt a little skippish. It didn't feel like a nice proper hop or leap whenever you're playing the game, so that's a nice change. They also changed the way that the first person animation looks whenever you're sprinting with the rifles, which I'm not really against because it definitely has a visible reduction in sway, which again, I'm a huge fan of. And then they also added an option in the audio settings which allows you to disable the noise ringing, like the sound, like your ears ringing effect whenever like a grenade goes off like on the other side of a wall or really too close to you or anything like that. They've disabled that effect and I love that. That effect was so annoying from a competitive stance. I'm really happy that that's an option to check off. And besides that, there's probably a bunch of other little nitpicky things that I could go in, or I'd have to go into detail and actually make notes of to remember, but those are the things off the top of my head that I can recall about the patch. So expect a video coming out either this week or next week regarding my thoughts on the various game modes. I'm not going to focus on every single game mode. I'm going to primarily focus on the respawn game modes versus the firefight game mode. And because I really don't think Checkpoint is in a bad position. I actually think that co-op is the strongest aspect of Sandstorm right now. So my future videos will kind of be diving into what I believe would make a better PvP experience, both from a casual perspective, and then I'm going to flip the script and go from a competitive standpoint. So thank you guys for watching. I know it's been a long time. Feel free to give me some hate. Feel free to give me some feedback. Also, if you guys like the patch or have opinions on it, if you haven't played it, I'd recommend to go play it before you actually make a comment. But be sure to keep an ear down here on YouTube and on Twitch because I'm going to be on both a lot more now that I'm only working one job. So you should see some more content on your timeline from here moving forward. Again, I usually close my streams out with this, but if you're watching this late at night, make sure you rest well, recharge, and enjoy peace of mind. Thanks.